Hello everyone, Jesse Webb, Traders Pro. Market conditions remaining mildly bearish in a bull market. We're seeing some weakness this morning in the futures markets, and that's not surprising. It looks like we could have one more leg lower, at least in the shorter term, for some support discovery. This retracement on the momentum indicator, we're starting to see it about that halfway mark now as well. Again, we could start to find some support now at these locations. Breadth also stuck in that middle after a little bit of a pullback. Sentiment, same location. So overall, buy-sell ratios, we're looking at starting to trend towards that bearish direction. We'll see if it starts gaining momentum, and then sentiment also sticking right around that halfway mark. SPY, if we look at S&P 500 and the chart pattern, had this little bearish bar the other day and then a counter trim back up again yesterday, and we may be continuing today. Again, it's markets look like they'll gap lower. Whether we find some support here at this level, and that's going to be the level that we test today, and we'll see if we find some support. We're going to need some support here at this location to continue this overall uptrend. I think if we start to break down through this area, we now create that shelf of support that now becomes resistance, and it just starts to get harder and harder for the market to continue the uptrend as we start to break down certain levels. So this will be that first area to be watching on SPY right here. And again, these are early indications of a trend reversal. Obviously, we never know if it's the exact top until you're looking back, with 2020 hindsight. But this is what it starts to feel like as markets are starting to weaken and we're at the top end of a trend, pretty significant uptrend as well. But at the same time, it's just a pullback. We've got to trust that it's a pullback until it proves otherwise. If it continues to slide, obviously, then we know that these are going to start to turn more red. We're going to get some sell signals shorter term, and so that's what we're looking for here in the shorter term to see if we start to gain some support on that. Leading sectors still haven't changed much: construction, aerospace, utilities, industrials, oil. But you're seeing more and more stocks leaning over into this hold and sell range. We're getting these buy-sell ratios that are dropping now. The average buy-sell ratio here less than 1 across the group. So again, it's mildly bearish. Could potentially turn over into a bearish trend in an overall bull market. So we've been in this uptrend, but we're retracing that. That's still going to be some buy opportunities on the bounce on a pullback. The new buy list, some interesting stocks in there today. Royal Caribbean, which is actually a nice looking pattern. When you have this uptrend, you have a breakout pattern, meaning it's breaking through this area right here, and then it pulls back, it retraces that, and then you get a confirmation bar off of that level. That's one of my favorite patterns and favorite locations to look for, especially this move when you have a good solid green bar that looks like that. It hasn't moved aggressively. It's only about 4%. So that allows a nice reward to risk setup to set your risk profile either at the bottom of the bar or at the bottom of the recent hold signal for a stop loss location. That's a stop loss location to be able to to lock in your risk location. Then you know exactly, at least unless there's something, an issue where the stock gap's lower or something along those lines. But for the most part, you've got a location that now you can define your risk and be able to go in and set up a trade with some confidence to know, okay, what's the worst case scenario in terms of this trade stopping out? How much is that going to cost me? One of the tools you can use on the site is you can add this stock into a portfolio or click on this. You don't necessarily always have to add it, but when you do that, it'll pull up this sheet, it'll pull up this purchase sheet, and then you can, if you've got an open webinar or an open portfolio, you can add that in, check the number of shares. Let's say that it's a $100,000 portfolio like it is in this case, and I could then simply decide the number of shares that I want. Let's say I know the stock is a $100 stock, $108, so if I did 100 shares, that's going to be $10,000 transaction price. Now what I can determine on my risk profile is decide, okay, I've left the stop loss blank right here. Now watch what happens when I add a number in there. We talked about this level right here as a stop loss. So let's call that, 101. Actually, let me mouse over that and see exactly what that low is. Let's do the low of the bar right here just for an example. The low of that bar is 104.48. So let's do 104.50. So 104.50. We may put that a little bit lower, if the market conditions are weak, if you were looking to buy. And again, I'm not saying this is a trade to do today. I just want to show you the example of how to set up your risk profile and what that looks like. So if I have my stop loss at 104.50 and now it's what this is telling me is my portfolio amount at risk. If I'm wrong and the stock stops me out, I've got $356 on the line of my $10,000 trade that I'm doing. So the trade at risk is only 3.2%, which is essentially the bar that we talked about. If it drops below the low of that bar, then I'm going to get stopped out. I'm going to lose 356. Now I've got my risk defined. I know it's going to happen if I'm wrong, and obviously we don't want that to happen, but we always have to have our risk established in advance before we make a trade so that we know what we're dealing with. We never want to set up a stock and then just wait and see what happens if it starts to drop lower and then hope that it turns the other direction. We want to have our stop loss location. So the two ways to look at risk management and stop loss are the trade amount at risk, which is how much am I wrong on the trade amount, which is this $10,000 if I'm wrong, and my stop location is pretty tight, which is only 3%. So that's going to make a 0.35 dent in my portfolio as a whole, which is this amount. So I'm looking at the trade amount at risk and the portfolio amount at risk as I'm going into a trade, and I'm analyzing, this is a stock that I'm interested in. Now, how do I set up my risk profile? I like the setup. I obviously don't know what the future holds, but this is that's one of the ways then to go in with some confidence in your trading plan to say, if I'm right, it's going to obviously continue higher, but my initial capital amount is the amount that I really am the most concerned with. Let's go through a couple of new buy lists. So that was the first one we looked at. I got a little sidetracked there. RCL, I like that pattern. Gap higher, medical stock, 30%. Up into this extreme range. Obviously, we want to wait on that, let it pull back into the buy zone. We can skip through it. TK, which is a transportation stock, a nice looking pattern here as well, moving into that buy zone. Meta, oddly enough, it's pretty interesting to see that Meta has a 96 rank. It's got an $800 billion market cap. That doesn't happen very often inside of this system because the percent moves on a massive stock like that are typically not this good. So Meta has got a really nice trend to it. At some point that's going to crack, but as of right now, it's continuing just to stair step higher, a pullback, a retracement, confirmation higher, and interesting stock. It's pulling into that list today. CRS, steel, which is a nice looking stock, nice trend, smooth pattern, not a lot of volatility on that. NTX, AZEK, building products, construction. So you're finding some of those stocks there as well. If you're looking for the leading stocks in each group, you can click on the sectors and then just simply click on, okay, this is construction, the leading sector of that sector. Here's my 63 stocks I can focus on. STRL. Okay, so we're seeing there's a lot of nice names in there that still have good solid uptrends, even with some volatility in the market right here. So these are your focus list stocks. These overall uptrending stocks that are strong stocks in the strongest sector is the place to go. If you feel like you need to continue to be adding to a portfolio or you have a space for a new stock in a portfolio, then obviously we're in a bull market. We're pulling back in a bull market. We can still look for opportunities in leading sectors. That'll do it for today's update. Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic day.